How's it going? Orlando Ruiz Jr. Thanks for clicking on the channel. Appreciate it. Coming at you from my car at lunchtime. Just finished my sandwich. So I thought I would try to get one of these reviews out since I didn't have enough time last night. So, 1941's The Wolfman, directed by George Waggner, stars Lon Chaney Jr., Claude Rains, and Bela Lugosi in a small role. Now, I grew up watching these old black and white classic monster films. As a kid, they were sort of my introduction to horror right before I started watching Freddy and Jason and Chucky over and over again. So, yeah, as a little kid, these definitely had a creep factor. But, now that I'm an adult, they're not very scary. But I do enjoy these films, mainly because I love the atmosphere. These movies have such great style in terms of art direction. Performances are top-notch considering these are horror icons that you get with Lon Chaney Jr. and Claude Rains and Bela Lugosi. And, classic story, man gets bitten by a wolf, has a real internal struggle, good versus evil. He's overall a good person, so you really sympathize with this guy, kind of like watching a struggling uncle with, dealing with alcoholism, because this man doesn't want to do anyone any harm. So at times it's like, shit, this is kind of painful to see this guy go through this. He has somebody tie him to a chair in the third act because he's afraid to go outside and hurt somebody. And it's just a very convincing, solid performance by Lon Chaney Jr. His acting in Of Mice and Men, 1939, I think really shows that this guy was more than just a horror actor. This guy could do pretty much anything. And, he's joined by the great Claude Rains. Claude Rains plays his father in the film. He was the original Invisible Man in the, I think it was 1933, Invisible Man. I think that's when that came out. Could be wrong. I might have to double check that fact. But yeah, Claude Rains, another great actor. He was great in Casablanca. Loved him in Adventures of Robin Hood, another great film. And he's great here in the part of the father, very likable. And you'll even see a young Ralph Bellamy. Those of you who don't know who that is, if you've seen Trading Places, remember the two old guys who did the Gentleman's Bet against Winthorpe. Dan Aykroyd's character, the two old guys were Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici. Don Amici was the guy with the little mustache. But yeah, it's really cool just to see all these, people when they're young and alive. And anyone that likes horror films, I'm recommending these old black and white movies, mainly just because, like I said, it has such great atmosphere. The foggy, misty woods, are so great. The, old big mansions and, castles, stuff like that you get out of watching the old Dracula movies or the old Frankenstein movies. Like, that's what I love about these old movies. It's just, the art direction, the music, like all of that makes for just a winning combination. And if no one is familiar with these films, yeah, check them out. I mean, they're definitely fun watches in October. And these old classic monster movies were doing the shared universe thing long before anybody else was. They were doing it back in the 30s and 40s. A lot of these actors, you'll see them in each other's movies at times, which is pretty cool, playing different characters and stuff. But within each series, within the Dracula movies or the Frankenstein movies or the Wolfman movies or the Mummy movies, a lot of these sort of take place within the same town sometimes, Visaria at times, Transylvania, or take place near each other. And you'll see just a lot of familiar faces, a lot of familiar actors in a lot of these old movies. And The Wolfman is by far one of the best, which is why I want to talk about it. Story grabs you from the moment the opening, when they introduce the the poem. As soon as I read that poem at the beginning of the film, it gets me excited every time. You know, even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night will become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. And it just has, you know, a nice, surrealistic, almost dream-like quality about it, as this guy doesn't know quite what's happening at first. Yet after he's bitten by the wolf, he's not sure what happened, and then he realizes what happened, and he's just, you know, you feel bad for this guy because he's at heart a good person, but you know, once the moon is full, you know, he has to you know, let the animal out basically, and you know, you're not going to see any gore. You know, that kind of stuff is implied, and you know, most of the horror is just all in the performances. You know, from people gathering around victims, talking about you know, what they're looking at. You know, the severed jugular is really the Wolfman's MO. So you know, you're not going to see that kind of thing, but you're going to see him pouncing on people, and you do see him make contact with his victims a few times, which is something that if you go back and watch the original Dracula from 1932, you know, that's one of those things that bothered me as a little kid. Even back then, I can watch it now and I still appreciate it just on its own merits. But it always bothered me, like, why are they cutting away? Like, why can't we see what Dracula's doing? And then later on, we find out, oh, he bit somebody. But no, in this, you know, we get to see the actual monster make contact with the victim. And, you know, like all great gothic classic horror films, you know, has a very tragic backstory for our main character. And, you know, I don't want to spoil what happens in the end, but if you've seen the 2010 remake of this that came out, well, 12 years ago now, directed by Joe Johnston, who I think let me get some in real hip. Sorry, lips don't want to open. Yeah, Joe Johnston directed the remake, which I very much enjoyed. And this is pretty much the bare bones version of that, without any of the fluff to sort of, you know, that was basically an extended version of this film with added gore, and, you know, it's stretched out to 2 hours basically, or hour 47, whatever it was. I guess depending on whether you're watching the theatrical or the director's cut. The unrated director's cut of the 2010 film is actually really good. But to me, there's nothing like the original. You know, I love the classics. I just love it for the atmosphere, the music score, the performances, and even the makeup is pretty awesome considering this is an old film. So if any of this stuff checks any of those horror movie boxes that you guys watch these movies for, please check it out. It is an old film, but it's a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. 1941, The Wolfman. So yeah, and oh, if you want to look for it on streaming, it should be on Peacock, because most of the Universal Classic monster films are on Peacock. But should you not have that streaming service and you just want to get the hard copy, yes, they have the Blu-rays, because these are real gems as far as horror cinema goes. They're timeless classics. Highly recommend them. I'm going to talk about, you know, Dracula and Frankenstein and Invisible Man and the Mummy later on, but I wanted to get started with this one because it's just one of my personal favorites, and always been partial to the Wolfman myself. The quintessential werewolf movie, really. So yeah, that about does it for this review. Thanks for hanging out for a little bit, and until next time, if those of you are just getting, you know, acquainted with the channel, please hit that bell and subscribe. I have lots more of these on the way. Lots of movies to talk about. So yeah, comment, share, like, and God bless you and take care.